So I hope that answers that question. We're going to go to question number 2, which is coming from Grayson Fuller. Grayson says, I've had multiple encounters where people directly approach me and my wife on the street or at a gas station asking for money, food, or a ride. I know most people would say don't give anything because you're feeding their bad habit, implying drugs here. And I know there's also the risk that if you do help or give, they may try to push for even more favors. But it's obvious that Jesus was compassionate toward beggars. What are some biblical principles for this in today's age? Grayson, I'm going to give you my opinion on this. My opinion is that people go through they get too extreme on this issue. Actually, let me rephrase that, because I think Christians should be extreme. So the problem isn't the extremity of their view. The problem is that their view lacks wisdom. Okay, we're to be as gentle as doves, but as wise as a serpent, Jesus says, right? So we're supposed to be very thoughtful and wise. Yes, you're to give to him who asks of you, right? But imagine if we took that rule with no wisdom. So when Simon the sorcerer comes to the apostles and he says, hey, I want to have the power you have. This is his version, his understanding of them. He goes, I want to be able to lay hands on people that they receive the Spirit, because Simon's probably going to try to sell this to others. And, he give to him who asks you. Well, why didn't they say, well, we have to be generous and give, so we want to try to pray that God would give you this ability too, Simon. Instead, they kick him out, right? Because there's wisdom here. It's not meant to be a rule that we take with no wisdom of any kind. So, the rules actually let me give you another example. 1 Timothy 5:8, which talks about helping others. This is a community of believers who have funds they use to distribute to the poor, right? And he talks about taking care of widows. But notice this, Paul doesn't use such a clumsy rule as give to him who asks. No other wisdom is ever added to this thing. He doesn't do that. He says, let a widow be enrolled. This is in the list of widows who get funds from the church. Let her be enrolled if she's not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband, and having a reputation for good works. Wait, so the church isn't just supposed to take care of every widow on earth? No, he's like, hey, if they're young, they can get married to somebody else and someone else is providing for them. We're not trying to burden the church while it does take care of people who are needy. And she has to have been a faithful wife of one husband, right? She has a reputation for good works. Like, otherwise, the church isn't going to do this regular taking care of her. This gives us wisdom, because as a pastor, right, I know firsthand that pretty much every church that's not maybe in a really tiny community is going to have people calling and regularly going to the church asking for money, because to the world and to the worldly people, they think the church is a rich institution. And it's usually not. Usually they're just struggling to get by for the most part. And they just come and ask for handouts. And so what I'm suggesting here is that here's a teaching of Jesus, right? Give to him who asks you. That's a general posture and attitude. It doesn't mean you don't have any wisdom about how you put that into practice. Here's an example from the New Testament in 1 Timothy 5:9 that proves that they're not just give to him who asks you in all scenarios, no wisdom applied. No, there's wisdom being implied. So, being applied. So that being said, let me look at your question one more time. I know most people would say, don't give anything because you're feeding their bad habit. Okay, that is actually wisdom. If you know the money you're giving somebody is being used to buy drugs and enable them to stay on the street and not be accountable for the life they're living, then I don't see how I'm helping them by giving them money. All giving isn't helping, right? Sometimes giving is harming. And it's good to have wisdom on that. So yeah. But if you do give and they spend it poorly, I think that's more on them than you. Not that it's all your fault, but you don't want to become an enabler in a real negative sense. You said, I know there's also the risk that if you help, they may push for even more favors. Okay, I don't care about that. Personally, if I help somebody and then they come up and they start asking for me all the time, I can just say no. So I'm not too worried about that. You just give because this is the right time and moment to give. You said it's obvious Jesus was compassionate towards beggars, and absolutely. In a couple ways. One, the early church, they would often take care of people that were poor, not just beggars, but poor. See, there's a difference. You could be a beggar but not be poor. You could be poor and not be a beggar. So they didn't just squeaky wheel gets the grease, but they would try to help people who had needs, and there's some wisdom there. But in another sense, the early church and Jesus was compassionate to the poor in that they treated them as equals. They didn't treat them as a lesser status individual, those who were poor. So, what are some biblical principles? Yeah, the number one biblical principle is this: you won't think clearly on this issue of money if you aren't considering all your money as belonging to God and your ultimate provider being God, not your job, not those other things. That's important because you don't want personal greed weighing in. That's not wisdom. My greed is not wisdom. Wisdom is this a good time to give? Does that person need help? Am I the one who should support and help them? All that is good, but boy, I want my money. I want my money. That's not good. That's not healthy, and that can be very harmful for people. So there's a few important things that I think you should consider.